Andrew Berry's breaking point came not with a loss, but with a pattern. For years, the Browns had overinvested in names that didn't deliver. Deshaun Watson, Jeudy, and the next star sold as a solution. But when Jeudy's production plummeted and public clashes with Shedeur Sanders highlighted deeper fractures, Berry finally pulled a lever. If you're into the real story and all the messy twists they don't show on highlight reels, go ahead and subscribe. And if you're sticking around to see how this Browns QB chaos plays out, you should definitely be subscribed. This wasn't just a wide receiver falling short. It was proof that the team's evaluation process and its culture needed a reset. The Browns weren't just losing games. They were losing clarity. Now, clarity is everything. Berry's overhaul of the offensive infrastructure reflects more than strategy. It signals the organization's willingness to confront its own failures. Draft picks will go to linemen first, and the next wave of receiving talent won't come with baggage. Cleveland's playbook is changing from personality management to performance alignment. With Sanders entering his critical third year, the front office is no longer improvising. It's executing. Jeudy's situation in Cleveland didn't fall apart quietly. It collapsed in full view, with numbers, money, and a public clash all lining up to expose a deeper problem the Browns could no longer ignore. What was supposed to be a high-impact signing turned into a symbol of everything that had gone wrong with the organization's approach to building an offense. Jeudy arrived with expectations: a $40 million contract, a $17.5 million annual cap hit, WR1 status. He was supposed to be the reliable, high-end target who could anchor the passing game and give a quarterback a true number one option. Instead, what the Browns got was 50 receptions for 602 yards. Not catastrophic, but nowhere near acceptable for a player carrying that kind of financial and strategic weight. At the same time, a rookie tight and quietly became one of the most productive and dependable players on offense. 72 catches, 631 yards, 6 touchdowns. With far less hype and far less money, he outperformed Jeudy in nearly every meaningful way. That contrast didn't just raise eyebrows. It forced the organization to confront a hard truth. Their biggest investments were not delivering their biggest results. That truth became impossible to ignore when Jeudy and quarterback Shedeur Sanders clashed publicly during the season. That moment wasn't just about emotions running high. It was about accountability. It was about a breakdown in trust between a veteran being paid to lead and a young quarterback trying to find his footing in a broken system. For Sanders, the season was a test of survival as much as development. Over his final 7 starts, he threw for 1,400 yards, 7 touchdowns, and 10 interceptions. On paper, those numbers are modest, but within the context of the Browns' offensive situation, they tell a different story. Sanders was playing behind an unstable offensive line that routinely failed to protect him. He was throwing to a receiving group that lacked consistent reliability. And despite that, he still showed flashes of elite potential when given even minimal stability. Those flashes mattered. They were enough for front office to make a decision about where the future of the franchise truly lies. Andrew Berry and ownership, led by Jimmy Haslam, didn't treat the Jeudy-Sanders clash as an isolated incident. They treated it as a symptom of a larger organizational problem. For too long, the Browns had tolerated underperformance as long as it came wrapped in a big name and a big contract. That philosophy is now being replaced by a more pragmatic, results-oriented approach. The new direction is clear. Build around Shedeur Sanders by fixing the environment around him. That starts with the offensive line. Berry has made it explicit that guards, tackles, and center are now the top priorities. Protection is no longer a secondary concern. It's the foundation. The Browns recognize that quarterback development is directly tied to pass protection. A young quarterback can't grow, improve, or be properly evaluated if he's under constant pressure. Sack rates, time to throw, and pocket stability aren't just technical metrics. They are survival tools for a developing quarterback. By committing to rebuilding the offensive line, the Browns are acknowledging something they previously failed to prioritize. Structural integrity matters more than star power. You can't fix a broken offense by adding more skilled players that the quarterback doesn't have time to execute. At the same time, the Browns are planning to use top draft capital to acquire an elite, All-American caliber wide receiver. This isn't framed as a luxury move. It's being treated as a necessity. The front office is signaling that they want a true top-tier receiving option who can produce, lead, and fit within the evolving identity of the team. This is also a cultural reset. The Jeudy situation exposed more than just poor production. It exposed a gap between rhetoric and reality. When a high-salary veteran fails to deliver and then publicly clashes with a quarterback, it doesn't reflect leadership. It reflects a failure in culture, evaluation, and consequence management. The Browns are now trying to correct that. The rookie tight end's breakout performance plays a key role in this shift. His production wasn't just impressive. It was revealing. He became a reliable security valve for Sanders, especially in pressured situations. That suggests Sanders instinctively gravitated toward dependability over reputation. When things broke down, he looked for the player who consistently executed, not the one with the biggest contract. That raises uncomfortable questions for the organization. If the coaching staff could maximize the output of a low-profile rookie, why couldn't they extract more from a high-priced veteran like Jeudy? Were the issues purely individual? Or did they reflect deeper problems in scheme fit, coaching integration, and player evaluation? Regardless of the exact mix of causes, the result is the same. The Browns no longer see Jeudy as a cornerstone of the offense. This reckoning doesn't exist in isolation. It's part of a broader pattern that the organization is now openly acknowledging. The Deshaun Watson contract is another example of how financial overcommitment to underperforming assets can distort roster construction. Watson's $80 million deal, followed by his benching, stands as a cautionary parallel. Both Watson and Jeudy represent anchored deals that limit flexibility, delay necessary corrections, and make it harder to pivot when performance doesn't match investment. The Browns' preference for long-term, heavily guaranteed contracts has made proactive roster surgery more difficult. It has forced the team to live with mistakes longer than necessary, delaying the kind of structural changes that are now finally being made. Barry's public candor about the offense is significant. In an industry where front offices often deflect blame onto vague concepts like chemistry or scheme fit, his direct acknowledgement of systemic deficiencies marks a philosophical departure. By stating clearly that the offense will receive the most investment, Barry is aligning the organization internally and sending a message externally. That message matters to players, agents, and future free agents. It signals that the Browns are no longer pretending everything is fine. It suggests a commitment to building a stable, development-friendly environment. For a franchise with a long history of dysfunction, that kind of transparency represents a meaningful shift. The pursuit of an All-American caliber receiver also reflects more than just a talent upgrade. It's a cultural statement. These prospects typically arrive with strong work habits, coachability, and a track record of situational awareness. Selecting one signals a preference for growth-oriented players who align with Sanders' development timeline. It's a move away from relying on established names whose habits and expectations may no longer fit the team's evolving identity. All of this builds toward one central reality. The 2026 season is a decisive inflection point. Jeudy's contract extends into that year. Watson's cap implications continue to linger. And Shedeur Sanders will be entering his third season, the traditional moment when franchises decide whether a quarterback is their long-term answer or a temporary solution. Every move Barry makes now is being judged against that timeline. If the Browns execute this vision correctly, they give Sanders a fair and functional environment. They give themselves a legitimate chance to determine whether he is the franchise quarterback they've been searching for. And they give the organization an opportunity to transition from perpetual rebuild to sustained competitiveness. If they fail, the consequences are familiar. Another stalled rebuild. Another quarterback in limbo. Another cycle of disappointment. That's why this moment carries so much weight. The Jeudy-Sanders clash wasn't just a personal conflict. It was a moment that forced the Browns to confront their own structural failures. It was a trigger for a broader philosophical shift that prioritizes foundation over flash and accountability over reputation. Jerry Jeudy's underwhelming season and public confrontation didn't just damage his standing. They accelerated a transformation within the organization. The Browns are no longer willing to tolerate mismatches between investment and output. They are no longer willing to build around hope instead of structure. Now, everything revolves around whether they can follow through. Can they rebuild the offensive line effectively? Can they draft and develop an elite receiver who fits both the system and the culture? Can they finally give Shedeur Sanders the support he needs to show what he truly is? Those questions will define not just Sanders' career, but the Browns' credibility as a franchise. So, where do you stand on this shift? Do you believe the Browns are finally making the right structural moves? Or are you skeptical that this is just another cycle with new language? Share your thoughts. Hit the like button if you want to see real accountability in Cleveland, and subscribe to stay locked in for everything that comes next. The Cleveland Browns have never been strangers to dysfunction, but what we're seeing now, right here, right now, is something different. Not because it's chaotic, not because it's controversial, but because, for once, they're responding with clarity. And Jeudy, he's become the catalyst. Not because he wanted to be, not because he played so poorly it forced the team's hand, but because, in one high-pressure, high-visibility moment, he collided with the franchise's future, Shedeur Sanders, and everything the front office had been trying to overlook got exposed. This wasn't just a bad game. It wasn't just tension on the sideline. This was an inflection point. Jeudy had been skating on the edge all season. Underwhelming stats, a steep contract, and a reputation that carried more weight than his actual contributions. 50 catches for 602 yards, while soaking up the salary cap like a true WR1. Except he wasn't one. Not by production, not by impact, not by presence. And when a rookie tight end with none of the salary, none of the fanfare, outpaces you in catches, yards, and touchdowns, it becomes harder and harder to defend your role. What made it impossible to defend was the confrontation with Sanders. That moment, that was the breaking point. Not just for the locker room, not just for the media, but for the front office. When your veteran receiver, who's supposed to be the leader, turns on the young quarterback you're building around, you're left with no choice. It's either your investment in leadership or your investment in development. You can't have both when one is actively undermining the other. And Andrew Berry chose development. That choice wasn't just about the locker room dynamic. It was about a larger recognition. The Browns have spent too many years chasing high-priced solutions that don't solve anything. Jeudy was just the latest example. And when the team took a hard look at what they were actually getting for $17.5 million a year, the answer wasn't just not enough. It was not sustainable. Because that's the key word now, sustainable. For once, the Browns aren't looking for quick fixes. They're not trying to buy their way out of dysfunction. They're turning inward, to the trenches, to the line, to the overlooked foundation that actually determines whether a quarterback like Sanders has a shot at success or not. Berry's new blueprint starts with protection. Guards, tackles, center. The entire offensive line is getting a reset. Because the film doesn't lie. Sanders spent the bulk of his rookie season running for his life, trying to create behind a collapsing pocket, getting hit before his second read could even break. And yet, in the middle of all that, he still managed to show flashes. Not just competency, but real next-level stuff. Timing, ball placement, mobility, pocket awareness. Things you can't teach, but you can ruin if you don't build around them. That's what the Browns are finally acknowledging. That quarterback talent doesn't grow in a vacuum. It needs support. It needs structure. And without it, you're just throwing a rookie to the wolves and hoping he survives. But this time, they're not hoping. They're rebuilding. And it's not just the line. It's the skill positions, too. The Browns have made it clear they're targeting an All-American caliber wide receiver in the draft. A prospect with the talent, yes, but also the character, the work ethic, the situational awareness. The kind of player who doesn't need a drama-free clause in his contract. The kind of player who makes the quarterback better, not angrier. That's the future of this team, not Jerry Jeudy, not Deshaun Watson's bloated contract, not another cycle of banking on names and ignoring fit, because that's how the Browns got here in the first place. They spent years convincing themselves that throwing money at splashy talent would turn into results. Watson, Jeudy, name after name, contract after contract. And what did it yield? One of the league's most expensive offenses, with one of the least reliable outputs. When Jeudy got outproduced by a rookie tight end, it was more than just a stat line. It was the final crack in the illusion. The Browns could no longer pretend that investment equaled value. They had to start asking the hard questions. Why wasn't Jeudy integrated into the offense? Why wasn't he consistent in his route running? Why wasn't he dependable on third downs? And most importantly, why was he so comfortable deflecting responsibility instead of earning his keep? What the front office found wasn't just underperformance. It was misalignment between scheme and skill set, between price tag and production, between attitude and accountability. So Barry made a choice. No more buying names. No more dragging around anchor contracts that limit your ability to adapt. No more building around players who think the check is the proof of value. From now on, it's performance first, fit first, foundation first. That change in philosophy isn't just overdue, it's existential. Because the 2026 season is already marked on the calendar in bold red ink. Jeudy's deal runs through it. Watson's cap issues still loom over it. And most importantly, Sanders enters his third season. That's the moment teams decide whether to extend or reboot, whether the quarterback is a long-term cornerstone or a short-term experiment. And everything Barry does between now and week one will feed into that decision. There's no margin for error. And that's why Jeudy, despite being technically under contract, is already functionally replaced. The Browns are building a new receiving core, centered around players who align with Sanders' growth curve, who don't get in the way of progress, who don't need to be coached on effort, who don't have to be told that consistency matters more than confidence. That's what the Browns are after now. And that's what Jeudy never delivered. In many ways, Jeudy's clash with Sanders ended up helping the team, not because it was healthy, but because it forced a moment of honesty. It made it impossible for front office to keep dancing around the disconnect. When a young quarterback's development is at risk, you don't gamble on chemistry. You cut the risk out. And Jeudy was a risk. When your locker room watches a rookie outperform a high-paid veteran with none of the drama, the message becomes obvious. This isn't about talent anymore. It's about buy-in. It's about doing the work. It's about who shows up every play, every week. The rookie tight end didn't just earn his role. He changed the expectations. And in doing so, he helped show the Browns what the future should look like. Smart drafting, effective development. Low-cost, high-output contributors who lift the team, not weigh it down. So as the offseason continues and the draft approaches, the Browns aren't operating from confusion. They're operating from clarity. They know where things went wrong. They know why the system failed. And they're not looking backward anymore. They're building forward. Around Shedeur Sanders. Around protection. Around culture. Because this isn't just about getting better. It's about being different. And if Barry's plan works, the Browns don't just escape the shadow of their own mistakes. They establish a new identity. One built on function, not fantasy. One where quarterbacks are protected, receivers are reliable, and drama is replaced with discipline. That's a Browns team no one's used to seeing. And maybe that's the point. There's no denying it now. Jerry Jeudy became the face of the Browns' failed promise. And for a front office that's been burned by that storyline too many times, this season felt like the final straw. They tried the high-profile, high-investment approach. They tried betting on potential. But when your WR1 is invisible on the field, explosive on the sidelines, and ultimately irrelevant when it matters most, what else can you do but move on? And that's exactly what Andrew Barry is doing, moving on swiftly and unapologetically. Not just from Jeudy, but from the entire era of misplaced priorities. The Browns have spent years chasing talent without accountability, building rosters with no cohesion, and throwing cash at problems that require discipline, not dollars. That's how you end up with Jeudy pulling in $17.5 million a year to run inconsistent routes, drop key passes, and make headlines for yelling at your rookie quarterback. That's how you end up with a rookie tight and outproducing your top receiver, and doing it without drama. That's how you end up here, again at a crossroads. But for once, Cleveland is choosing the right path. This isn't panic. It's precision. Barry has turned the page not because of one bad season, but because of a clear pattern. When Jeudy failed to deliver, it wasn't just unfortunate. It was familiar, and that's what the Browns are trying to break away from, the cycle of overcommitting to underperformance. And nowhere is that more evident than in how they're backing Shedeur Sanders. Despite the growing pains, despite the numbers, they saw something real in Sanders this year. He didn't have protection. He didn't have consistent weapons. He had very little margin for error. But through all that he flashed. He made plays. He showed leadership. And most importantly, he didn't flinch, even when his most expensive teammate turned on him. That matters. That earns trust. So now, the front office is putting everything behind him. Start with the offensive line, because they finally understand you don't develop a quarterback without building from the inside out. You don't expect greatness from a young signal caller who's being hit 2 seconds into his dropback. You give him time. You give him support. You give him structure. And when it comes to receivers, they're done with the potential star experiment. They want results. They want reliability. They want someone who doesn't need to be reminded that blocking matters, that route discipline matters, that showing up every snap matters. That's why the upcoming draft is more than just a talent search. It's a reset. The Browns aren't just looking for athletes. They're looking for answers. Culture fits. Players who raise the floor, not just the ceiling. They're done gambling on big names who shrink under pressure and point fingers when things go wrong. Jeudy's time in Cleveland will be remembered for what it exposed, not just about him, but about how the Browns used to operate. Deshaun Watson's contract was already a financial anchor. Jeudy's became a cultural one. And now, finally, the team is cutting both loose. The message couldn't be clearer. Produce or get out of the way. So if you've been waiting for Cleveland to stop pretending and start building, this might be the moment. If they get it right, 2026 won't be another wasted year. It'll be the beginning of something real. Let me know what you think. Was this the right move, or is the damage already done? Hit like if you've had enough of watching talent fumble under pressure. Drop your thoughts in the comments, and make sure to subscribe. Because whether the Browns rise or collapse again, we'll be here for every play, every pivot, and every last piece of the fallout.